My husband, Nathan, the man who held my hand through 3 labors, who memorized my coffee order for 15 years, who cried more than I did when our youngest daughter took her first steps. That man looked me in the eye today and told me he had been sharing his heart, his body, his secrets with another woman. The word sharing, it's such a gentle word, isn't it? Like sharing a dessert or sharing an umbrella in the rain. There is no gentleness in this. This is not sharing. This is a demolition. And the worst part, the most terrifying, soul-shattering part was not the confession itself. It was the quiet, the absolute stillness that followed. The clock on our kitchen wall ticked 3 times. Tick, tick, tick. And in that silence, I could feel the entire architecture of my life. Every memory, every plan, every silly little inside joke we had built together crumble into dust around my feet. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stood there, my hand still resting on the counter where, just an hour before, I had packed his lunch, placing an extra chocolate chip cookie inside because I knew he'd had a tough week. If you are listening to this, if your heart is also lying in pieces on a cold kitchen floor, then please, I beg you, stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened after that silence, the choice I made when every fiber of my being was telling me to run, it did not just save my marriage, it rebuilt it into something I never knew was possible. And if you are holding on to the broken pieces of something you once loved, what you hear next might just show you how to begin gluing them back together. Please, listen, and if this story touches you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more tales of the human heart. To understand the sheer scale of the collapse, you must first see the city that stood before it. Our life was not a grand palace, but a warm, lived-in home. It smelled of freshly baked bread on Saturdays and the faint, clean scent of Nathan's cologne on our pillows. It sounded like our children's laughter echoing in the hallway and the soft, familiar hum of Nathan's snoring beside me, a sound I had complained about for years, but secretly found comforting. It was a life built on 1,000 tiny certainties. His keys landing in the blue ceramic bowl by the door at exactly 6:15 p.m., his hand automatically finding the small of my back in a crowded room, the way he would leave the last sip of coffee in his mug for me, because he knew I loved those bitter, sweet dregs. We were Amelia and Nathan. We were a unit, a package deal. We finished each other's sentences, and after 20 years together, we had started to look a little bit alike, around the eyes, in the way we smiled. We had built this life, brick by steady brick. The 3 beautiful, chaotic children. The house with the slightly overgrown garden. The shared history that was so long and so deep. It felt like a country only the 2 of us inhabited. I thought I knew its every border, every hidden path. The first crack was so small, I almost dismissed it as a trick of the light. It was a text message about 2 months ago. His phone buzzed on the coffee table while he was grilling in the backyard. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a single name. Chloe, work. The message preview read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. Your advice was incredible." My heart did a funny little stutter. Last night? He had told me he was working late, troubleshooting a server issue. I picked up the phone. It felt heavy and dangerous in my hand. I put it back down. It's work, I told myself. He's a project manager. He gives advice. It's his job. I was an expert in the art of self-deception. I was the chief architect of my own ignorance. But the seed of doubt was planted, and in the fertile soil of a long marriage, it began to grow. I started noticing other things. The new, subtle fragrance on his shirt when he came home. Not his cologne, but something lighter, floral. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when he typed. The new password on his laptop. He became distracted, a little distant. He'd look at me, and his eyes would seem to be focusing on something just behind me, something I couldn't see. I concocted 100 excuses. He was stressed about the new project. He was worried about our eldest's college applications. He was just getting older, we both were. Maybe this was just what marriage felt like after 2 decades. a comfortable quietness. I buried my suspicions under school runs and grocery lists and PTA meetings. I was so busy building a life, I failed to notice the foundation was rotting. The confrontation did not happen in a blaze of fury. It happened on a Tuesday evening in the quiet hum of our kitchen. The children were upstairs doing homework. I was washing dishes. He was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone with a small, absent-minded smile. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. My hands were deep in the soapy water. I stared at his reflection in the dark window pane, and I just knew. "Nathan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Who is Chloe?" The smile vanished from his face. The phone clattered onto the wooden table. The silence that followed was thicker and heavier than any I had ever known. He looked up, and his eyes met mine in the window's reflection. And in that moment, I saw it all. The guilt, the shame, the terrifying truth. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to lie. He just deflated. His shoulders slumped, and he put his head in his hands. "It's over, Amelia," he whispered, his voice muffled. "It's been over for a few weeks. I ended it." The soapy water suddenly felt freezing cold. I pulled my hands out, dripping, and turned to face him, leaning against the sink for support. "How long?" He couldn't look at me. 4 months. 4 months, 120 days of lies. Of kisses goodbye in the morning that meant nothing. Of holding me at night while his mind was with someone else. Why? The word was a broken thing, barely a breath. And that's when he said it. The sentence that will be etched into my soul forever. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate, and said, "I was lonely, Amelia, lonely." Lonely? In this house full of noise and life and love, with me lying right beside him every single night. The absurdity of it was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. "You were lonely," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. I looked around our kitchen, at the drawing our youngest had stuck on the fridge, at the worn spot on the floor where we danced while waiting for the kettle to boil, at the life we had built. "So you just went out and found someone to fill the silence?" The question hung in the air between us, a monstrous, shapeless thing. Nathan's face crumpled. "It wasn't about the silence, Amelia. It was about being heard. Heard." The word was a different kind of knife, sharper and more precise. Because I had been listening, or so I thought. I listened to his work frustrations, to his worries about our parents' health. But had I truly heard the man he had become, and not just the husband I thought he was? What followed were days that bled into one another, a blur of gray pain. I moved into the guest room. The scent of his cologne on the pillows there was faint, unfamiliar. It was a scent that didn't belong to me, a ghost in my new cold bed. We moved around each other in the house like polite, shattered ghosts, putting on a brave face for the children whose questions about, "Why is Mum so sad?" we deflected with weak smiles and extra helpings of dessert. The anger was a fire in my chest. It was all-consuming. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his things out of the window. I wanted to find this Chloe and show her the cracks she had helped hammer into my children's world. I drafted 100 text messages in my head, each one more venomous than the last. But one night I found myself standing in the doorway of our daughter's room. They were all asleep, their faces peaceful, utterly trusting in the world we had created for them. The eldest had her father's smile, the middle one had his thoughtful frown, the youngest his dimple. They were living, breathing pieces of him, and I realized with a sickening jolt that if I let my anger tear him apart, I would be tearing them apart too. The next morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He looked hollowed out, a shell of the man I knew. "We need to talk," I said, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Not as enemies, not even as husband and wife right now, but as the two people who built this family." He looked up, his eyes wary, expecting my rage. "I am not going to leave you," I said, and the words felt foreign on my tongue. "And I am not going to shout anymore, but I am broken, Nathan. And if there is even a sliver of a chance for us, you will have to help me pick up every single piece." You will have to show me with every breath you take from this day forward that our life together is worth more to you than a moment of weakness. That was the beginning, the first trembling step on a path that felt like walking on shards of glass. Rebuilding trust is not a grand gesture. It is not a dozen roses or a lavish holiday. It is 1,000 tiny, painful, consistent actions. It started with radical honesty. He gave me all his passwords. He didn't flinch when I asked to see his phone. He would tell me without me asking, "I'm going for lunch with Mark today," or "Chloe emailed me about the project closure. I'm forwarding it to you." Every time he volunteered information, it was like applying a tiny cooling balm on a burn. We started talking, really talking. Not about the children or the bills or the leaking tap. We talked in the dark of the guest room, sitting on opposite sides of the bed. We talked about his loneliness. He spoke of feeling invisible, like he was just a provider, a fixture in the house, and not a man with fears and dreams that had gotten buried under mortgage payments and parent-teacher meetings. And I spoke of my own loneliness, of feeling taken for granted, of the quiet ache of realizing the passionate young lovers we once were had been replaced by efficient co-parents and business partners in the enterprise of family. It was excruciating. There were nights I cried until I was sick. There were nights he sat with his head in his hands, sobbing apologies that seemed to come from a bottomless well of shame. We went to therapy. We learned to listen without becoming defensive. We learned that the infidelity was not the cause of our rot. It was a devastating symptom of it. We had both, in our own ways, abandoned our marriage long before Chloe ever entered the picture. The healing was slow, agonizingly slow. There was no single moment of forgiveness. It was a daily choice. Some days the choice felt impossible. I would look at him and all I could see was his body with another woman. The image would flash in my mind, a cruel, unwelcome movie, and I would have to leave the room, my heart pounding with a fresh wave of betrayal. But other days, there were small miracles. The day he remembered it was the anniversary of my father's death and brought me tea in bed, knowing how hard that day is for me. The day I was sick with the flu, and he took a day off work, not because I asked, but because he wanted to be the one to take care of me. He sat by my bed, reading a book, his presence a quiet, steady anchor. He was doing the work not to be forgiven, but because it was the right thing to do, because he was rediscovering the man he wanted to be. One evening, almost a year after the confession, we were in the garden. The children were playing, and we were sitting on the porch steps, our shoulders not quite touching. The setting sun cast a golden glow over everything. It was quiet, but for the first time in a very long time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "I know I can't ever erase what I did," he said, his voice low, "and I don't expect you to ever forget. But I hope, one day when you look at me, the memory of it won't be the first thing you see." I looked at his profile, at the familiar curve of his jaw, now etched with new lines of regret and wear. And I realized that the man sitting beside me was not the same man who had betrayed me. That man was arrogant, selfish, and lost. This man was humble, patient, and present. He had faced the worst of himself and was actively choosing to be better. I didn't say anything. I simply reached out and placed my hand over his. His breath hitched, and he turned his palm to intertwine his fingers with mine. It wasn't the passionate, electric touch of our youth. It was something different, something stronger. It was a choice, a promise, a bridge, carefully, painstakingly rebuilt, one fragile plank at a time. Our relationship now is different. It is not the innocent, blind trust of before that is gone forever, and perhaps it should be. What we have now is stronger. It is a conscious, chosen trust. It is a love that has stared into the abyss and decided to build a garden over it. We are more honest, more grateful, more present. We never take a single peaceful moment for granted. The moral of my story is not that you must forgive infidelity. The moral is that some things broken can be rebuilt, but they will never be the same. And that is not always a bad thing. Sometimes what is rebuilt is stronger, more beautiful, and more resilient because it holds the memory of its own breaking. It knows its own strength. If you are in the middle of your own breaking, know this: the path to healing is not a straight line. It is messy, it is painful, and it demands immense courage from both people. But if both hearts are willing to do the work, to face the ugly truths and sit in the devastating silence together, then a new dawn, however different, is possible. And to you, my dear listener, thank you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this painful, but ultimately hopeful, chapter of my life. Your presence here has been a comfort. If this story has resonated with you, touched a part of your own journey, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to join me for more stories of brokenness and rebuilding, do subscribe to this channel. You are not alone.